Good evening and welcome to the regular Ceres City Council meeting of Monday, June the 8th. I have something to read before we get started. Or should I do my roll call first?
No, go ahead and read that.
Okay. This meeting will be held in accordance with Executive Order N2920 issued by California Governor Gavin Newsom on March 17, 2020. The Ralph M. Brown Act, California Government Code Section 54950 et seq, and the Federal Americans with Disabilities Act. This meeting will not be physically open to the public. All members of the public may participate and comment via the application Zoom. Zoom meeting information and call-in information was posted on the agenda and on the city's website. Remote public comment is also available by emailing the city clerk at cityclerk@ci.ceres.ca.us. The city clerk will read your comment into the record during the public comment period. May I have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Condit,
Here.
Councilmember DeRossett,
Here.
Councilmember Klein,
Here.
and Vice Mayor Rhino.
Here.
And for the record, Mayor Vieira is absent this evening.
Thank you. And we have the invocation tonight by Pastor Chris Henry of Valley Christian Center. Is he here by Zoom?
Yes, Vice Mayor, let me unmute his mic. Pastor Henry, your mic is on. Pastor Henry, we're not able to hear you. Pastor Henry, can you try speaking once more? I apologize.
Yes, I can hear you now. It looked like it was muted on your end for Tom Westbrook, but now I can hear you. Yay.
Great, thank you.
Pastor Henry, would you like to lead us in the invocation?
Certainly would love to do that. Father, we are most thankful for this opportunity to once again gather as the city of Ceres and do the business of this city and the thousands of residents here who depend on these council members every day, every month. And Lord, we're especially thankful that yesterday we had a great march that ended in no violence, just hundreds of citizens saying, using their rights here, and the rights that you've given us here in this country, and using them peacefully. Lord, thank you so much for that. After watching and seeing how much damage there has been, we are thankful for that. But we are also thankful that that here today we have this opportunity to legislate and to lead this city in the direction. So today, Lord, I pray that your wisdom falls on each and every one of us as we determine the course that the city will take over the next month. We thank you for those who have been elected to office. We ask that you grant them special intelligence and wisdom today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Now, if we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have no presentations tonight. Citizen communications to the council on matters not included on the agenda. While the City Council welcomes and encourages participation in City Council meetings, adopted rules allow no more than 5 minutes. Public comments will now be accepted through Zoom. For those participating through the web, please raise your hand to request to speak, which is the hand icon at the bottom of your screen. If you are participating by telephone, please press pound 9 on your phone. Star 9 on your phone. The city clerk will call your name in the order the requests are received. When it's time for you to speak, the city clerk will unmute your microphone. City clerk, please provide the name of each person that has requested to speak. And do we have any comments, city clerk?
I see no hands raised at the very moment.
We'll wait a minute and see if anyone calls in. Have we received any public comments through email?
There are no public comments via email, Vice Mayor.
Then we will close the public comment period. Appointments to boards and commission, there are none. Conflict of interest declaration, are there any members of the City Council who have a conflict with anything on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll go on to the consent calendar. All matters listed on the consent calendar are considered routine in nature and will be enacted by single motion unless otherwise requested by an individual council member or public for special consideration. Otherwise, the recommendation of staff will be accepted and acted upon by roll call vote. Is there anyone on the council that would like to pull an item on the consent calendar?
Item number 6.
Item number 6. Is there anyone in the public that would like to pull a consent item? City Clerk, do we see, oh, Mr. Yeakley raised his
Mr.
hand.
Yeakley raised his hand. Let me unmute his mic. Mr.
I don't
Yeakley.
have the, excuse me, I don't have the agenda in front of me, but I'm not sure if he was referring to the one with the fire trucks.
I'm sorry, was it about the surplus of the fire trucks?
Yeah, I think
Yes,
Gene's
is that-
talking about item number 7.
All right, did you want to pull that, Mr. Yeakley?
Yeah, I
All right,
got
thank,
something to say on that.
all right, thank you. Okay, if those are the only two items, items 6 and 7, do I have a motion?
Move to approve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13.
Second.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Condit,
Aye.
Councilmember DeRosa,
Yes.
Councilmember Klein,
Yes.
and Vice Mayor Rhino.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Item number 6, resolution number 2020-14, 53, approving a contract with West Coast Arborists for tree maintenance and authorizing the city manager to execute a contract. Councilmember Klein?
Well, in reading the staff report, I know in the past that this has been pulled from the budget. And as reading the staff report, when it comes to recommendations of the council for approving, there was no budget set in the resolution. And then looking on page 3, they do have a 5-year tree trimming pruning cycle budget put in place. But then if you go back and you look at Exhibit B, there is also another tree trimming, pruning, replacement also put in there that I would like to see some kind of budget measure put in the resolution for us to adopt. The two things one on page 3, and the other thing is Exhibit B. The figures do not match up or do not align as far as what I looked at, so I would like to see some kind of budget measure put in the resolution.
Well, I was actually going to pull the same item, but I had different questions. It looks like on page 2 of the staff report, it would really be a cost savings to do the grid prune contract costs versus emergency removal. But my question is, who's to say that they would have been pruned before they required removal? Because I know from my own personal experience a couple years ago, we've had a non-city tree regularly pruned, and about 6 weeks after it had its regular pruning, we had a huge windstorm come in and it took the whole tree down. So I don't think that we can say we would have saved necessarily emergency removal if they had gotten their regular pruning. But then my other question would be for the city manager. If we're going to be discussing the budget later in this meeting, should we be talking about approving a contract when we're going to be we could potentially decide not to pass a new budget?
Let me answer that one.
Okay.
So this would be year 11. We've had 2 previous 5-year contracts with West Coast. We've done 1 year of grid pruning.
I thought it said we did 2.
Every other year, I think it's only been 1. That was the Eastgate area. So we've done the 1 year of grid pruning, and every other year it's been pulled from the budget for budgetary constraints. So right here, this contract and this agreement only sets the pricing. Should we do the grid prune, which is what staff wants to do, that will cut down our liabilities on the trees that are just overgrowing. So all it's doing is setting pricing. We're not guaranteeing them any monies. We're not guaranteeing them on an annual basis. Here's how much you're going to do. If there's monies available, we'll do a grid prune. If council pulls it, like it has been in the last several years, we just won't do the grid prune. But we do the emergency work.
Okay, so
And the emergencies are going up.
and we have been doing business with them since 2012.
Correct.
And that's why you are requesting that we not do a formal request for bids with anyone else? Because they've done
They did the survey, they do the inventory, they maintain the system, so that when we actually have an emergency that needs to get done, when we call them, they've already identified the trees that's in their system. So they know the trucks, the equipment. We did some pricing with Central Valley Tree Service here in town about a year ago when the city engineer was doing a pavement project, and the pricing was about 40% higher than what West Coast is. So we know we're getting a good deal from West Coast.
But are we required to go out to bid when it's over a certain dollar amount? You know that?
I think that amounts 25,000. I think that in this regard, we are just setting the pricing.
Correct. So we're setting the pricing and we're asking council to approve the contract with them based on the pricing. This is how we've done it the last two contracts with them, actually.
Does anyone else on the council have a question?
The funds that it comes from, it's not general fund, is it? It is general fund, it
It
doesn't
is
say it.
general fund.
And it's a service account contract. 100, whatever.
But again, it doesn't have to be spent. It's only in emergency circumstances.
Correct, so there's two components to it. There's the emergency work and then there's the maintenance. The emergency work obviously is going up. We're at about 80,000, gonna be about 80,000 this year. This last weekend, we lost quite a few trees. So that number's gonna increase. The more we push off doing the maintenance to the trees, the more emergencies we have, the more liabilities we have, trees falling on cars, houses, those types of things.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm still confused. It says that staff is recommending we adopt a resolution approving a contract and authorize the city manager to execute the contract.
Correct.
So it seems to me that once we've done that, aren't we contractually obligated then, whether or not it's in our budget?
But the contract is, it's written in the contract that only if monies are available. That language is in the contract.
Paragraph E, 8. Is that under commencement of work? Well, the way I read it, I don't see where it says if there isn't any money available under 8, unless I'm reading it wrong.
Well, the way I read it is unless there is executed a purchase order. So if the Public Works does not contact them and give them a purchase order to go do the work, we owe them no money. It's like buying a piece of equipment, a tire or whatever. So Public Works would have to execute, tell them we want to do this. So if I read this right, Jeremy, basically what we're doing is we're approving this and setting a ceiling or a cost of what you're going to do, but not guaranteeing them the work. The only time the work can be done is if you generate a purchase order and have them perform it.
Correct.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Is there anyone from the public that would like to address the council on this item? Doesn't look like there is. Could I get a motion, please?
I do have one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Mr. Westbrook, is this similar to the way it's been handled for the last 2 or 3 years?
I believe it has been handled in this manner, Councilman Klein.
And how many times called out for service, let's say last year, would you estimate they called out with a purchase order last year?
Individual requests, so what happens is a resident will call and there's a tree branch down, tree branch hanging, depending on the size of the tree. If the arborist from West Coast deems that it's a hazard, then we call them out to go do it. So we probably generated excess of roughly 50.
Now, did we,
And that was the emergency work.
that's it. Now, we still went out and trimmed if a citizen asked for something to be trimmed?
So the municipal code and the ordinance reads that residents are required to lift the trees up to 7 to 8 feet from the sidewalks. If the tree's hanging on the house, if there's a huge limb that looks like the tree's been splitting, we'll call the contractor. Otherwise, we take care of it in-house. We'll do our own trims, we do the majority of the work gets done in-house.
Okay. I have no other further questions.
City Clerk, do we have Mr. Yeakley requesting to speak?
I believe so. Let me
No.
unmute his mic.
I have my glasses on, but I can't read all of that.
I thought you kept looking at me. I'm like,
No, and there's little printing right there.
exactly.
And you just thought I was mad dogging you,
I was just
right?
saying, what?
All right, I guess Mr. Yeakley doesn't have a question. So do we have a resolution or a motion?
I'll move to adopt Resolution 2020-53.
Second.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Condit,
Aye.
Councilmember DeRossett,
Yes.
Councilmember Klein,
Yes.
and Vice Mayor Rhino.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
All right, thank you, Mr. Damas. We have no unfinished business, no public hearing.
We
I
actually
believe
need to
there
go
was-
to item number 7.
Oh.
Mr. Yeakley pulled that.
I'm just moving right along.
Good.
Item number 7, resolution number 2020-54, approving the surplus and donation of fire engines 216 and 217 to the Modesto Junior College Regional Fire Training Center. Mr. Yeakley pulled this item. Is he there, City Clerk?
His mic is unmuted.
Mr. Yeakley?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, I just briefly saw that. I didn't write down the agenda number. But with the shortage of revenue coming into every city in the United States now, I think that it's a good thing to give it to the training department there in Modesto. But at the same time, the city needs revenue. And I don't know what Chief Wise has to say about what the price of a used fire truck, and I don't know the individual units and the equipment they have on them. But some of those things do sell to other communities that can't afford an expensive fire truck like the ones we've got coming in or already did. I think this should be considered, and made not a decision right now, possibly, until we can find out, the city can find out, and Chief Wise, what we could get for those fire trucks. And if it's not that significant, go ahead and give it to them. But, or just give them 2 trucks and try to sell 2 of them. But if we can get a fairly decent amount of money, if it's just several thousands or 5,000 or 10 or whatever they sell for as a package or individually, that's revenue that we have as a city. So anything we can bring in, and we're trying to bring in people that have closed their stores because of the virus, these people ain't producing revenue and tax money. So this is money we can use, no matter how minute it might seem in price. This is something we can put to use. And I think that should be very well considered before we just give it to the training facility in Modesto. Thank you.
Chief Wise, would you like to address this comment?
Sure. Good evening, Council. These 2 engines, one's a 1991, the other one's a 1996 Pierce apparatus. Good evening, Council. Can you hear me? Okay. These 2 engines are way past their life expectancy. One's a 1991, the other one's a 1996. Generally, we use fire engines for 10 years as first out apparatus, and then they go into a reserve status, hopefully for the next 10 years. So as you can tell, both these apparatus are very old and well past their prime. One of them's actually been rebuilt 3 times. One of them has over 150,000 miles, and the other one's close to 150,000 miles. And they both have approximately 15,000 hours of operating time. It's very difficult to get rid of a fire apparatus these days, especially with the CARB rules and different things that are limited what a buyer could do with the actual engine out of the fire engine. So on the open market, we feel we can only get a few $1,000s at best with these apparatus. And if we donate them to the Regional Fire Training Center at Modesto Junior College, they will be assisting and training future firefighters. And probably about 70+% of our firefighters came from that academy. So we would be giving back to the community and helping out with our future firefighters. In the past, we have here at Ceres, we donated a fire engine to a community in Nevada years ago. And where I came from, we've also donated fire engines, one to Honduras, another one to Mexico. And we've tried using brokers, and when there was an auction site in Salida, we tried auctioning an engine off there that was in much better shape with a lot less hours and mileage, and we got just under $3,000 for it there. So it's just very difficult to get rid of fire apparatus. So this would be going to, something to help out our college and our future firefighters that we will likely be looking at as possible recruits.
Thank you, Chief Wise. Councilmember Klein?
Well, I just wanted to be, I have been going back and forth with Chief Weiss on this today, trying to be a little bit understanding and respectful. And he did share with me a website that of fire apparatuses that are up for sale. And one of them that I did look at was 10 years newer than one of the ones that he's donating. And its minimum bid starting out was $5,100. It was on the website for quite some time, and there was no bids on it. It had half the amount of hours on it, half the amount of mileage. The other thing is that, you know, I did ask him what it would cost us to sell it. We would incur anywhere from a 15 to a 25% brokerage fee. So if we sold it for $3,000, 25% of it would go right off the top. We do have the luxury of using the Modesto Junior College Fire Academy for training when we go out there for training. And I know a few years ago we had our second Fire Ops 101 class, and I went out there and took that as a council member out there, and that was free of charge. So, you know, after the beat up that I gave Chief Weiss today on the subject, I think that the county as a whole would benefit from it. So going that far and donating it, we have done that with police dogs. Let their handler adopt it. The last fire apparatus, I believe it was about 3 or 4 years ago, we donated to a volunteer department in Nevada.
Oh, that was a lot.
Yeah,
longer.
it's been since I've been
Rachel,
on the
Nevada.
council. So I think that, you know, the worst case scenario with two of them, if we was to go out and sell them, we might get $4,500 total. So I think that I can support, you know, the resolution and donating the equipment.
Councilmember Condit?
I would just echo my colleagues' comments, and thank you, Chief Wise, for giving us that in-depth explanation on that. And I do think it's more of a long-term investment, as my colleague was stating, since our future firefighters will be utilizing this engine over at MJC, than to take the roughly $4,000. So this is more of a long-term investment for our city as a whole.
Councilmember DeRosa?
Yeah, Councilmember Klein hit it on the head, so I don't really have to state the same thing. I was going to talk about the brokering aspect of it, what it would cost us to actually get rid of the two apparatuses, so I'm all in favor.
Okay, is there a motion?
I'll move to adopt resolution 2020-54.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Condit?
Aye.
Councilmember DeRosa?
Yes.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
And Vice Mayor Rhino?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Well, I will go back and say we have no unfinished business, no public hearing, no business, and a discussion item, which is item 14, preliminary draft budget fiscal year 2020-2021 presentation. City Manager? You know, and maybe before you go into a full-blown presentation, I'd like to ask the council if they want you to go forward with that, or if there is something else we'd like to do tonight. Is there any discussion among the council?
I almost think we do like a Cliff Note version, because we don't know exactly what's going to be taking place over the next number of months, and I know some of the numbers are going to be changing quite drastically.
Do we just maybe want to do the one sheet that showed how much our expenditures would be and what our reserves and all of that would be? Mr. Westbrook, can you do that instead of your, you know, I really appreciate that you've spent a lot of time and staff on this presentation, but can you just kind of give us the overview? You know, it's the general fund future projections.
Absolutely.
Well,
We've got a
before-
technical issue
Mr.
here.
Westbrook, before you go on, and after he gets done with there is one aspect that I'd like to go over, and at least have a question, so when he brings the budget back, that at least, you know, we can have a better understanding
Sure.
of one aspect in the budget.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Westbrook.
Yeah, I was going to share my screen with you, but I don't have the ability to do so at this moment. You can share your screen through. Okay. So where'd all the people go? Okay. All right. Sorry, I was a little distracted. Council, trying to get here. So I think we want to talk about the expenditures as they relate to the general fund. So let me get through my 50-point slide presentation to that screen. We can talk about it. I get paid by the slide, so that's why I included a bunch in here. Okay, so this is the preliminary projections for the draft budget. So this page is not as good as the next page that I'm going to show you, but I wanted to give a representation of what you're seeing here. So this shows a beginning budget balance of 5.6 million in the general fund. What this doesn't account for is some salary savings and some frozen positions. So if the council elected to do nothing, we would use almost $2 million in our reserves, which would drop that percentage down to 13.6. This does account for salary increases, workman's comp, kind of moving forward. But I wanted to show you the next slide because that's really where the difference is made. So in this fiscal year, because there's been a number of vacant positions throughout the course of this fiscal year since July 1st of 2019, we're expecting to realize around $780,000 in unexpended salary and medical cost and retirement costs. And so when you take that estimate at the end of the fiscal year and you add that to the beginning budgetary balance of the general fund, it brings us up to a $6.4 million in our reserves, in our general fund reserves. And so what you can see on the screen here, which is somewhat small, I do apologize for that. You can see that in the yellow column, that's the proposed 2021 budget. It has a subtotal of revenues and transfers in at $23.6 million. It shows expenditures of $24.7 million going out. So what we've done there is when we look at the amount of reserves, we kind of took those salary savings and moved them across, in addition to freezing a number of vacant positions within the city. The savings there, you only utilize about $800,000 of reserves, and it keeps your reserve balance of expenditures at 22.8%. Now, saying that, there are a number of positions that are frozen, which kind of are across the organization, about 21 of them to be exact. Of those positions that are proposed to be frozen, the general fund impact of that is $1.289 million, so almost $1.3 million. There are a number of positions that are not general fund impacted that, with the council's consideration, staff would like to move forward with hiring of some of those positions. And then there is one position that staff would like to discuss moving forward with that could provide some administrative service to the finance division and both code enforcement. So it would kind of be a shared position. It's a position that'll be vacant in the finance division, and so the salary is split differently. It's not just 100% general funded position. So the other thing that we talked about here, which this reflects, is we have a payment for our fire apparatus. It's $304,000 per year. That repays our sewer division. We took a loan from the sewer division. What this screen in front of you shows is we were recommending to hold off on payment of that back to our sewer fund. You would probably ask me, well, what does that mean for interest to the sewer fund? It's about $9 million, so, or $9,000, sorry, rather, not 9 million, $9,000. Too many zeros on that one. And so if we elected to just defer that payment back to the sewer fund this year, the numbers on the screen are correct. If the council elects to say, no, we'd rather pay that sewer fund back, then our amount of reserves would be about 1.1 million, which I believe Letitia would drop us to about 21% of reserves.
But you know what I noticed, Mr. Westbrook? One of the first things when I was elected was I was really strong about keeping our spending within our revenues. And it took us a few years, and we finally got to where we weren't spending more than we were bringing in. And so when I look at this, the proposed 2021, the revenues are 23,601 and our expenditures are 24,704. So we, again, are going to start spending more than we're bringing in, if I look at this correctly.
You are looking at that correctly, yes.
Okay, and I personally don't want to see us going in that direction again. I mean, it took us years to get to where we were not spending more than we were bringing in, and my big thing was, personally, you can't keep taking money out of your savings to cover your everyday expenses. So you need to set yourself up to live within your budget. Councilmember Klein?
Well, I was going to say part of the same sentiment you did, Vice Mayor, but the other thing is too, Mr. Westbrook, you did answer the question, because looking on this general fund future projections, when I looked at the numbers, I came up with our ending budget of $5,338,000. That is because you left off the repayment of the fire equipment, okay? But there was nowhere in the notations, or unless I missed it somewhere, that was gonna be left off. Because when I added up, you know, it didn't come up to the 5.6. And so one of the questions were gonna be, why are we off that? So we'll make a notation on there that the difference is.
Yeah, the difference is that repayment. So we wanted to ask that question of the council. If we want to repay for that engine, then we just add that amount back in.
But wouldn't it either been better to make that notation on this spreadsheet that they were not included, or to at least include it and give us an option to take it out?
Yeah, gotcha. Yep.
Thank you. Councilmember Condit?
I would agree with the Vice Mayor's comments by living within our means. Also, Mr. City Manager, is the community center, is that deficit being reflected this time around this year?
That's still included as part of the reserves. So it did not get taken out and put into the general fund.
Councilmember DeRosa?
Yeah, Mr. Westbrook, the Case Manufacturing gave us, last year in the 2019, 2020, $2 million, and then it's projected to be 1,380. So that's a big reason also why there's a huge deficit in regards to.
Yes, so the estimated revenue received is a little over $2 million for all the dispensaries this year. That number is dropping to $1.38 million. The reason being is that some of those development agreements for Patient Care First and Jaden's Journey will be up this year. And so what staff did is we tried to anticipate what they had been paying us each month to date. And so once they got to that expiration date, we don't know when they'll be renewing or if they will have a desire to renew. But what we did is staff budgeted the floor, the bottom amount, moving forward through the end of the year. If they renew at their current levels, then those numbers would go up in terms of the Case and Patient Care First.
So, realistically, that number might kind of even itself out. The only bad part is, going forward today, without that revenue, we're going to be really
We need to
having to pay
learn,
attention to detail.
we need to learn to
Right.
live within our means.
And then obviously with the situation, the COVID-19 and stuff like that, that is also a reflection of this, correct?
So what we don't have yet is we won't get the really good sales tax numbers until about August of this year for the current quarter we're in. So we won't know how significant the impact to the sales tax revenue will be until late August. What this budget also doesn't include, as you all are aware, that the federal government approved some CARES Act money. Stanislaus County was granted $96 million of that, and they have earmarked, which I believe the Board of Supervisors will be considering tomorrow, $15 million of that to be allocated to the cities to help the overall budgets. We don't know what that means just yet, but the preliminary share for the city of Sears would be $1.6 million. However, none of that is reflected in this current budget, or the proposed budget, rather.
So one of the things that I don't see as a council direction because we don't know what the effects of COVID will be on our budget, we could also choose to have a continuing resolution and in September or October, revisit the whole budget.
Absolutely. As part of the options in the bottom of my presentation was going to say exactly that. So in the past years, over the last 15 years, on a couple of occasions, I think 3 specifically, the council authorized kind of moving forward with the budget, but only for a number of months. The last time it happened was in 2008, and the council approved the budget for only basically that first 25%, expiring in September 30th of that year. What that would do is it would give us better sales tax revenue information at that point in time, and then we would also have a better handle on the CARES Act funding. Most likely, that can't supplement the loss in sales tax revenue, but there are other areas that we would be able to kind of backfill some of those monies, hopefully most of it in the general fund. And if it was, then it brings our circumstance to a better picture, a better outcome.
So if we were to entertain the idea of a continuing resolution, we basically would say we would wait till September or beginning of October, and we could allocate 3 months of our existing budget, basically go into every department and take what 3 months would be, and then just say this is what you have available to spend until October?
That would be, yeah, the proposed budget would be exactly that. We would say, okay, here's the proposed budget, and that's what you get for the first 3 months through September or 30th. And so likely that discussion would need to be happening in earnest in early September to kind of talk about that, the continuation of the budget for the remaining 9 months.
And we could also, at that same time, give staff the direction that we don't want to, that we want to freeze positions other than the ones that we agreed to at the April 27th meeting?
Yeah.
Because again, that's a lot of money,
Yeah.
and I would hate to get us into a position that we're going to hire people without really knowing what our money is. And like I said, we already said at the April 27th meeting that we needed definitely the dispatch and the firefighter to go forward with that, but come back to us for actual direction.
Correct. And so
Correct.
the only one that's currently moving forward is the dispatch position. I believe that they're going to have testing for that very soon. None of the other positions have moved forward at this time. One of the things that you're absolutely correct, we could certainly look at the balance of all vacant positions. One of the things that I was suggesting was perhaps looking at some of those positions that are not general fund related, and potentially moving forward with those now before we got to the September date, but that's totally the council's call and direction.
Well, I would just rather do it as the whole package and wait until we have our full-blown discussion again on the budget. Councilmember Condit?
I would agree with the Vice Mayor's comments tonight.
Councilmember Klein?
Well, I'd like to move on to another question, if I may.
You may.
You know, something that really stood out in Maine, and I direct this question to Human Resources, Mr. Slater. What would be the average cost increased for employees group insurance per employee for 2020-21? Average per employee for the year. The increase in the cost or the total cost? No, the increase in the cost.
It's generally pretty low.
Okay, so, and the reason I ask this, okay, and I asked the question is, it really stood out in my looking at the budget, looking at the employee group insurance, and I listed every department in the city. Police Services has 17 employees, no changes. Their average cost increase was $941 per employee. But then when you turn around and you look at Engineering Department, the increase was $8,100 per employee for group insurance. For the water department, $6,000. For the parks, it was only $214 per employee. So they're all over the board as far as what their group insurance costs are. PD's $2,900. And you look at code enforcements, it's only $1,000 per employee. So that is why I'm asking what the average cost is.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. For some reason, I had in my mind you were talking about life insurance. You're
No,
talking
it says
about-
group insurance,
Okay,
employee
so
group insurance.
I would need to know what that includes on that item then.
Well, that's why I'm asking the question, for when you guys bring it back, you can look at that aspect and say, okay, here's the reason why. Because, I mean, recreation, group insurance is $12,500 per employee. That's what the increases are just for the recreation department.
Okay,
Yeah.
so,
Councilman Klein, I think that if you look at this screen here, you can see the estimated 2019-20 group insurance for the entire city is $2.23 million. In the proposed budget, it's $2.3 million. So it's going up about $70,000 citywide.
It's going up 70,000.
So it's
Si-
going
si-
from 2.23 million is the current group insurance. It's going up to 2.3 million.
Okay, well, I will make a copy of this and give it to you, because when you look at this thing, I mean, there's places that are going up $50,000, or that's what's requested for that department, an increase, you know? And that's why I'm asking.
okay, is there anyone else on the council that has a question before I open it to the public?
I just have one, and this is for Chief Wise. I know today that we lost a gentleman that worked a long period of time here in Ceres, and congratulations to B.C. Gomes. Obviously, we're losing a position there, and there's already 2 positions that are gone where we're paying overtime quite a bit. With Mr. Gomes leaving, is that something that we need to hire today for, or is that something that we're going to be okay only having 2 BC officers, you know, for battalion chiefs for the, you know?
Sure. Yeah, very fortunate. Back in November, we did promotional testing, so we do have current promotional lists for all ranks. And over this last month, we completed our chief's interviews for firefighter candidates, so we do have a current firefighter candidate list. So my plan was to conduct chief interviews this week with all the promotional lists, and then promote up. So we promote a battalion chief, we promote a captain, and we promote an engineer. So then we would have the 3 vacancies, the 3 firefighter vacancies. I would like for sure to fill at least 1, because that would be 3 vacancies. And plus, with injuries, we got a potential for a long-term injury right now that's going through the evaluation process. So the potential of having 4 people off.
Right, so having 3 non-hiring, right? We know that there's 2 because we froze the 21 positions. But this 1 position, obviously, again, overtime. I mean, what would the overtime numbers look like in regards to not having 3 firefighters?
So an entry-level firefighter position is approximately about $50,000, around there. Maybe that might be C-step. But the total package for a firefighter is $122,000. So if you just take simple number, time and a half, you're looking at about $75,000 to $80,000 to fill a position, and that's if it's a firefighter at that level filling that position. But sometimes we have to use engineers and captains to get a body in there to get that filled, so the costs go up for overtime. But you know, there's a balance. You know, of course, the guys like some overtime, but then too much, and then you're putting a strain on the organization. And I think once we start hitting that number, 3, 4, we're really putting a strain, because you have your people that are taking their vacations. We're going to have injuries. Unfortunately, it just happens. So then you're really adding up on the overtime, and then, you know, guys are getting past that tipping point, which is too much overtime, and then you start mandating.
I mean, so one of the things that I would suggest is that we seriously think about hiring 1 firefighter.
Well, when we had the discussion at the April 27th meeting, we did talk about that 1 firefighter, and the discussion that the council agreed on was that he could move forward with all of the testing and everything, but before he did the actual hiring, he would come back to the council for authorization.
Right, but it wasn't for that position that we're losing today, is it?
Correct. It was for the two vacancies
for
that
the
we
two
currently
vacancies.
have. We had before Chief Gomes
So now you
announced his
want to
retirement.
hire two?
No, I want to leave those two alone. We're not going to hire those two. We just lost a firefighter, and so we're going to move people up the ranks, which means we're going to do a heck of a lot more overtime costs, and it was already there in the budget, that particular position. Does that make sense?
No, not to me, but.
I do understand what you're saying, Councilman DeRossett. Since we have Battalion Chief Gomes is retired, which will be retiring in a couple of weeks officially,
The 13th.
officially.
Yeah.
And what you're going to do is he's already tested for the position, so a captain would take over that position. An engineer would take over the captain's position. And because BC Gomes is retired and those two moved up, and a firefighter will take over an engineer's position, that would open up that one engineer's spot, which wasn't part of those two, because now would make you three engineers three firefighters positions available. We'd still freeze the two, but hire for the one that was just now created. And that's the direction
Yes.
Councilman DeRossett is trying to say. And I would tendency to agree with you, Councilman DeRossett, to keep those other two frozen, but yet go ahead and fill in as we move up the ranks.
That similar circumstance also will exist in the police department. So this budget proposes to freeze 3 positions. We found out recently that somebody is going to retire out of the department. It would kind of be a similar circumstance as the fire department. It would be nice to kind of at least backfill that position, still having 3 frozen, but then backfilling the 1 retirement. Additionally, the engineering division lost one of its engineering techs. There's 2 new positions, associate engineer, and there was 2 engineering techs. It would be nice to at least backfill that one of the engineering techs, and if we were going to leave the other 2 frozen at this point.
But
through
there
September.
again, now we're going to start, let's fill this position, let's fill this one, let's fill this one, when in fact, we don't know what our money is. We absolutely don't know. And I get that we need to fill these different positions, but everybody can then say, well, we're going to have this vacancy and we're going to have this one, and that's going to happen within every department. So where do you draw the line and say, no, we're just going to wait until we know what money we really do have? You see what I'm saying?
I
Every
do.
single department is going to say that we've lost someone in engineering, we've lost someone in finance, we've lost someone in parks. So basically then you're back to square one, where let's just start filling positions, and we don't know, again, what kind of financial shape we're going to be in. That's what I'm saying.
And I agree with you on that aspect of it, but I know that I've had the conversations with the fire and that we're paying overtime almost, again, if we lose a third one, if I'm correct on this, having some talks with the gentleman today, that we're going to be almost like where we could have hired a position. Is that correct?
Well, it's fundamentally, it's cheaper to pay overtime, but then again, you have that balancing point where you have too many vacancies. Now you're just adding, now guys, instead of working a 48-hour shift, you got more guys working a 72, a 96. So there's just that balancing point where you have too many vacancies.
But we couldn't wait until September when we know what our actual dollar amount is?
Whatever
Well,
council's
that's what
direction
I'm
is, yeah.
That's what I'm asking, why we couldn't wait until September, or if you find that you start having injuries and we're really short, then come to the council, just like we had said April 27th, and come and say, we need to fill this position. Councilmember Condit?
Thank you. I would agree with the vice mayor. I do think it could turn into a slippery slope. Would I love to hire another firefighter today? Absolutely. But like the vice mayor mentioned, it does turn into a slippery slope, and I do think we should do the right thing and waiting to September to see those numbers. And like you said, though, Vice Mayor, if there's an emergency circumstance, maybe you can bring that to the council, and we can authorize that if there's an injury or an emergency or a special occasion for hiring.
Thank you. Does anyone else on the council have a question before I open it to the public?
Yeah, I got one more thing. The only bad part about an emergency, right? Because, I mean, you're telling me, and again, we're dealing with crazy stuff in this world. COVID-19, mental health, a lot of issues, right? And so if we have firefighters working 72 hours or whatever that number would be, shifts, I think that's not doing a good job as far as being leaders of this community in regards to people that we're trying to service. And again, this is a position that's there. It's already in the budget. It wasn't something that, oh, we're gonna hire somebody new. No, somebody is gone and this position is just being filled in.
Isn't
And
that true of all of the positions that we're freezing? They're all in the budget?
those have already been frozen for a long period of time. We've already talked about the reason why. I think we should hire the people that are non-general fund, because if it's gonna help our city smooth process in regards to doing the day-to-day operations, and it doesn't have a direct effect on the general fund, then I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. And maybe we're overpaying the ratepayers, because here we have these positions that we should be hiring from the water fund, but we're not gonna hire them because, why? I don't know. Maybe we can hire.
I mean, that makes sense. If there's a guarantee that there's absolutely no money coming out of the general fund. I mean, is there an
Right.
entire,
I mean, we had this conversation this afternoon. I mean, again, the ones that actually have some sort of connection with general fund, I would say no to. Zero, even if it's $1. But if it's a position that has to do with the water rate, say, for example, we're doing the water surface treatment stuff right now, we're trying to get all dialed in, but I think that's something that we really need to take a good look at.
Councilmember Klein?
Well, and then the other thing is too, is I have a question out here. We're going into fire season. You know, and if we wait till September, we're going into fire season. So with them down 2 firefighters, and now they're going to be down 3, that sort of limits their ability to strike teams and other avenues. So, you know, I think that, you know, the 2 firefighter positions that were proposed to freeze, we freeze them. But with the retirement of the battalion chief and as the progression goes up, I still feel that we need to have the one replacement. So.
Okay, is there any other comment from the council? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment on the proposed budget? Oh, excuse me, Mr. Slater?
Just real quick, I appreciate the dialogue and I understand the council's position. I did want to have you think about one thing. I hear you saying that we want to revisit it in September because we don't know what the numbers are. But I would ask that you think about what are we going to do in September if the numbers don't look good? We're going to be in the same situation workforce-wise, and how are we going to get over the hardship that the operation is going through with the lack of staff?
But if we hire people and we find out we really don't have money in September, then we're going to turn around and lay those same people off?
Not necessarily, but because I would say, I'm asking you to think about what your plan might be in September if there's no money. Are we going to look for money somewhere else to try and bring on more staff? Or are we going to just tax the current workforce as best as we can? I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there because there's a possibility that we may not be able to hire in September either, based on that same theory.
That is true. Thank you. City Clerk, do we have anyone from the audience?
Yes, Vice Mayor. First hand raised is Daniel Padilla.
Mr. Padilla?
Mr. Padilla, your mic is unmuted.
Yeah, I think, can you hear me?
Yes?
Okay. Yeah, I think, Vice Mayor Rhino, you mentioned the slippery slope for hiring employees, and I think Tom mentioned that you know, we're trying to separate, you know, general fund employees from employees that do not hit the general fund. So, I mean, I would ask that you know, please reconsider and let us fill an engineering technician position. We had, like Tom mentioned, an engineering technician resigned. His last day was last week on Monday, June 1st. And then we've also laid off a temporary inspector, and we have more projects now than we've ever had. So we are, you know, I'm very happy with the staff. We're doing a great job, but to try to keep that up. I mean, we really need to fill that position. Otherwise, we're going to pay a consultant twice as much to do that work. And also, I think on the budget that we adopted in 1920, we're significantly below that. And so when you, on this continuing resolution, if we're going with the status quo budget, I mean, there's room in there to allow us to hire even an extra position or two, you know, beyond just that one that resigned last week. And again, we are not touching the general fund. So anyways, just wanted to mention that to the council.
Thank you, Mr. Padilla. I think basically what you were saying is that you want to fill the engineering tech position because you've lost one and that your inspector was laid off. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think you're correct.
And the engineering tech is general fund?
There's two engineering techs, one's not general fund and one hits it for about 10% of their salary.
Okay.
Can I add something?
No, I think Mr. Westbrook got it. Thank you, Mr. Padilla. Is there anyone else from the audience, City Clerk?
Mr. Yakely just raised his hand.
Mr. Yeakley?
Yes. I wanted to address, all of a sudden it went from one issue to something else. Councilmember Klein was talking about group insurance. I got a little confused. Maybe people that are listening to this, not participating at home or whatever, are we talking about health insurance or some kind of other insurance when you're speaking of group insurance? How many avenues does it entail?
Mr. Klein was, or Councilmember Klein was speaking about the medical insurance.
And at that time he was speaking, it sounded like there was, for different departments, there were different insurance expenditures. Some were higher, some were lower. And why is that? And why isn't every department under one window?
Well, I think that was a question that Councilmember Klein was asking staff to provide at our next meeting for clarification.
And that would probably, I hope, Councilman Klein would get them to answer the question, how come each department or several departments might be different on their insurance expenditures for their group insurance. I don't know about cities, but, you know, and Mike, he works for a company, and so some of the rest of the people there. Usually a business or a corporation is under one insurance policy, you know, and why they would have more than one, I don't know, but I hope you do get that answer, Councilman Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Yeakley. Am I the only one that's having a problem hearing the speakers, that it's like okay, so it's not just me?
Linda.
And we had an unstable internet connection is what it showed. Did you see that, City Clerk?
Yeah, that's with my computer, but I'm plugged in hardwire, so I don't know why it would be unstable.
All right. Do we have anyone else that would like to ask a question? City Clerk?
I do not see any other hands raised, Vice Mayor.
Councilmember Klein?
I just want to address Mr. Yeagley's question. In my findings, what I'm going to do is, Mr. Yeagley, is turn over my findings to city staff, Mr. Westbrook, so he can better understand what my question was in direction. So when we have our next meeting, they can come back and they can provide us with the answers to my question. So I hope that'll help, and they will address it at that time.
Mr. Ball, did you have a question?
Sorry. On our budget for this year for IT, we've requested workstations and our virtual cluster. Unfortunately, we don't have the staff to implement those projects. We right now have 75% of our workstation fleet is over 6 years old, and our virtual cluster has exceeded its lifespan as well. The virtual cluster is no longer supportable, and if it fails, we will lose 30 actual servers in production. So I just want to make sure you're aware that our understaffing in IT is going to prevent us from implementing those until that time.
Thank you.
I have a question real quick. The staffing, is that general fund or is it one-third, one-third, one-third?
We're internal services, so it's a small piece of everybody's, which ends up hitting general fund.
It is general fund. So maybe what the council should consider is having staff prepare a continuing, a continuing resolution for the next meeting, but include in there what their absolute must are for staffing, right? And the ones that are not general funded at all. And show that to us, and then we have the continuing, because we couldn't adopt a continuing resolution tonight because we don't have one, and we
No.
don't have a dollar amount or anything else, so.
Correct.
it
There's
would
nothing to
need-
adopt tonight.
It would need to come back to us with,
Absolutely.
say, allocating 3 months of what the proposed budget is, but then also listing specifically the different positions that are not general funded, or in the case of Mr. Ball and what his explanation is, maybe that's how we go.
Mr. Padilla's.
And yeah, that's what I'm saying. But then I can imagine every department is going to have, this is an absolute must, but at least we're going to have the actual breakdown of whether or not it's general fund and everything like that. And we have instead of us just talking about it with
Right.
actually seeing
idea.
figures.
Right. I
Yeah,
agree.
the other position that we would include as part of that discussion is a fleet mechanic. So, but yeah, we can certainly put all those together and bring them back at the next meeting.
And show what is general funded, and if something is internal service funds, you're going to show that, yes, there still is general fund money.
Yeah, like,
That's being spent.
like Robert mentioned, and then Jeremy would tell you too, internal service fund from a fleet mechanic is going to hit all the divisions, which will hit the general fund as well. It's somewhat difficult, I think, to forecast what the cost is, but we're going to do our best to show that so that the council can make an informed decision.
I know we talked today, can you also you said you're trying to maybe maneuver, and there'll be a cost savings in regards to a secretary, or what was that, the code enforcement, which was that we had? that
Yes,
discussion?
yes, that'll be one of the positions that we show as well.
That we're saving money.
Yep, so currently the code enforcement secretary position is frozen. That's about a $90,000 hit to the general fund. The finance division secretary will be vacant very soon. If you hired the finance division secretary, a third of that cost of the $90,000 hits the general fund, so it'd be about $30,000 cost, with the other 2/3 being paid by water and sewer.
Well, were you saying something about sharing that with code enforcement? Okay.
Correct.
So then again, the next council meeting, you could lay all of that out for us, so we have actual dollars and,
Yep, we'll include all of that so the council can, what I'm hearing is the kind of the priority, what we would recommend, in addition to some of those positions that don't have any impact to the general fund, show what those are. Maybe we can move forward in addition to some of these other positions that are internal service funds and what impact those may or may not have on our
and that,
general
and that
fund.
would include the continuing resolution with
Yes,
the
absolutely.
3 months?
Yep.
Okay.
So the continuing resolution, we will put a September 30th date on that continuing resolution.
And can you also include since we're going to lose a police officer to retirement, what that cost would be if we hired another police officer, right? You'd put that in there?
Yep.
Because that's something that's already going.
So the budget already includes that police officer position. We were just recommending freezing 3.
Right.
But yeah, certainly if it's a vacancy, then there would be 4 of them that would be vacant. And it'd just be the decision from the council on how many to freeze or how many to move forward with.
Okay, so do we need to have a motion, or is it just more of
Nope.
a discussion?
I think it's just a discussion and direction.
Are you okay with that, Councilmember Klein, are you okay with that?
Yes.
Councilmember Condit? Okay. All right, so we will move forward. Council member referrals. Any council members that would like to have an agenda item placed on a future agenda shall make a request under this section of the agenda. Do we have any referrals?
I do have a referral. Me and Mr. Westbrook had discussed this earlier, but when we start our welcoming the public back to our meetings, I'd like to recognize the Burlati employee who was
Oh.
involved in helping that citizen regionally. I think his name was Mr. Ledlow. I read that in the Courier the other day. I had his name. Bubba Leblow. So he's a Burlati employee. I don't know if you guys read that story or not, but I think we should recognize him when we're able to welcome the public back. And then just a follow-up, I know I had made a referral, I believe it was about a year ago, about the Ceres Historic Museum, about doing in honor of dedication for the Reiners family, and I'd also like to include the Bergamaschi family. Both those families were pioneers in establishing our Ceres Historic Museum. I think it's important for us to remember our historians as well as our city's history, so it'd be nice when things calm down and get back to normal, maybe we can do a dedication and honoring of the Reiners family and the Bergamaschi families for their contribution to the Historic Museum.
Thank you. Does anyone else on the council have a referral? No? Reports? I have nothing to report. Councilmember Klein?
I'd like to say that, yesterday I attended the Black Lives Matters protest or event, and it was very well respected. I will say that, and I got to give a lot of credit to Chief Collins, Captain Crane, Jeremy Dumas, his department, the other departments that participated in it, also the organizers for working with the police department and listening to what the city staff would recommend and how well everything went off and how behaved they were and how it was overall conducted. I think that it shows the support that they have in the community, and I think that they showed the support that they give us and the respect. I think that the part that I did attend, I did not march with them, but I was there in the park, and I think that the overall aspect was good. So I do want to commend the city staff and the police department for how they conducted and how it was conducted overall. Thank you.
Councilmember DeRosset?
Yeah, I just kind of reiterate what Councilmember Klein stated in regards to the great job that everybody did. I mean, everybody, the entire police department. And I think also when you sit there and you think about the students at Ceres High School, and I know that you talked about the organizers, and I don't know if they were all the organizers, and I do like your idea, maybe if there's a few of those organizers, that maybe we bring them here to a meeting and say, thank you for doing such a great job of bringing the light, obviously the issues that are there at hand in the world, but our citizens, I mean, there wasn't any issues whatsoever. We didn't have any people, doing anything poorly, making bad judgments in regards to, even people driving by. I didn't hear anybody yell out the window, anything stupid. When I'm playing baseball or when I was coaching all this, you'd always hear that all the time. But, I think our citizens did a great job. And then I didn't do the march either. I was there in the morning with a few of the council members. And, but I just thought it turned out great, so.
Councilmember Condit?
Yes, I also was at the demonstration, and I echoed the comments of my colleagues and definitely want to show appreciation for the organizers who are Ceres High students who are going to be seniors next year. I do think Councilman Drossett's idea of maybe bringing them here as well when we're open to the public and honoring those 5 young women would be great. I also thank you, Chief Collins, Captain Crane, Ceres PD. You guys did a wonderful job. City staff did a wonderful job. It was a great day for Ceres, and I think we set a good example.
Mr. Westbrook?
Yeah, just wanted to mention, so staff is shooting for having in-person meetings with the council's concurrence, beginning your first meeting in July. If the council's okay with that, then it will be kind of back to normal the way we had been with the council dais, staff at the tables, and then members of the public. So that's kind of what we're shooting for, which would be your meeting of July 13th, about a month from now. Just wanted to say the same thing, that I do appreciate the efforts of Chief Collins and Captain Crane and their command staff. They did a great job preparing for the event yesterday, the protest. It was quite an undertaking. When you're contacted Wednesday and somebody wants to have a protest Sunday, you don't have a lot of time to get the resources together. They did a fabulous job doing exactly that. My goal at the end of the day was to have nothing to report to the city council in terms of how the protest went. It went off without a hitch. There were no issues. It was wonderful to see people expressing their First Amendment rights and also keeping the community intact. I watched people as they left the park throwing their water bottles in the trash cans, just like I hoped they would. So it was good all around. And under Chief Collins and Captain Crane's direction, we were prepared for the worst, and it was never materialized, which I'm extremely thankful for.
Thank you. Mr. Hallinan?
Nothing to report, Mayor.
Ms. Diaz? Chief Collins?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch a little bit more on the protest. A lot has been said, but I really want to thank Chief Wise for, he provided a command post for us, and it worked out very well. We were able to mark where our units were all the time, and Captain Crane, you know, when you have something this magnitude coming down to your city and people have seen what has happened all over the world and the amount of stress and the unknowns, we were dealing with a group of Ceres High teenagers, but you don't know what they're going to bring with them and the anti-protesters that can come with them. So the ultimate goal was not to have violence, destruction, or arrests in our town. And it's hard to sit back as a leader of the organization and hand it over to your second in charge and make sure everything goes okay. And I gave general guidelines of what we need to do and how we need to do it, and step back. And he did a wonderful job. He and his team did an excellent job of gathering the resources, putting a plan in place, and the execution of that plan was just flawless. We drove around fast at times yesterday to make sure that everybody were in their spots, and when we got there, they were there. You know, in our briefing, I made sure that our people remain professional, not that I had any doubt that they wouldn't, but they were under a lot of stress as well, and they were going to be provoked potentially to get into an altercation, and they performed way above my expectations, and I couldn't be any more proud of them. But I also want to say that it was a lot of county resources that came and helped us put this thing together. CHP came, they provided outlooks at the on-ramps to prevent people from getting on the freeway like we've seen on the media. Stanislaus County Probation provided transport officers to free up our officers to stay in the city. Rank Security, Ontel Security volunteered their services. I think they sent a total of 10 cars to make sure that we had high visibility, uniform presence in key areas throughout the city, and they volunteered their time for that. Jeremy provided staff to come down and provide the group power so they could have their message heard, and Hank spent all day riding around in the truck, tripping lights to make sure that traffic flowed and the protesters had a safe route to get to where they were going. So collectively, this was, you know, our motto is together we achieve, and it took more than just Ceres resources to make this thing happen. So I'm really grateful for the amount of help that the county leaders allowed us to have in order for this thing to happen.
Thank you. Captain Crane?
Thank you. Just real quick, we estimated the crowd yesterday at about 350 people that were marching, and I'm pleased to announce that out of that, we made 0 arrests.
That's
and
great.
that's all I have.
Mr. Damas? Mr. Ball? Mr. Slater? Chief Wise?
Council, I know I've been talking about it the last year and a half, every meeting, but our apparatus is finally all here. So it's finally here. We should have it from the dealer towards the end of this week, first of next week. And then we'll start getting the tools on it, finish up some training, and then we'll get them in service. And we will, as things get back to normal, we'll have an open house for the public so they can all come down and take a look at them. So it's finally here. You've been hearing me talk about it for a long time, so hopefully you won't have to hear that very much more. I'd like to thank Councilmember Condit for bringing it up. We had already decided at the fire department, we have an award system at the fire department for if somebody makes a good save or something like that. It's a Medal of Valor. We also have a special one for a citizen, and I believe we've given it out one time that I know of. So we had already talked, and we wanted to contact Mr. Ludlow, and as soon as we had our first city council meeting, to recognize him with the Citizens Award for Valor for assisting in that rescue of those two elderly homeowners. It's been a busy week. We've had 4 structure fires, significant structure fires in the last week, one being a second alarm fire yesterday afternoon right as the protest was ending. And then shortly after that, we had another structure fire at about 9:30 last night, so it's been busy. As you mentioned, Chief Gomes' last day will be June 13th, 29 years in the fire service, 26 of those years here. He, in just his style, he requested just to kind of quietly slip away, and so there will be no party or anything for him going away. We just did a flag ceremony this morning, and that's all he wanted. So I'd like to thank him for his service to the city. He started out as a volunteer and then got picked up later as a paid firefighter and spent his whole career here. And he's been a real attribute to the city and to our department. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you. Mr. Lohr?
Well, time for some summer fun. I'm excited to announce that summer registration begins tomorrow. It starts at midnight tonight. We're offering about 90 programs this summer. Those are camps and classes, and we're expecting everything to start Monday, July 6th is the start of the programs. We think we'll be cleared by the governor to open by then, and we're going to have about 6 weeks of summer, so very excited this is going to happen. It's great to hear some kids in this building again and get it utilized. So very excited. Again, summer registration will start tonight or tomorrow at midnight, and please look online. If there's a class, you can go outdoors into our summer camps, or you can actually take some virtual classes at home. So we have a variety of new programs and services to deal with the pandemic. So please, we're excited to have kids back.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor, I have
Yes.
a couple more things. It's
Oh,
me. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the amount of citizen support that showed up at the protests, and more importantly, how they conducted themselves. We had a lot of passionate people in our town, and they came out and supported the event as I expected them to, and the way I wanted them to. And another thing is, our city manager, Tom Westbrook, got a firsthand experience of what it takes to put something of this magnitude together. He was part of meeting with the organizers, and when they were unwilling to change their route for safety reasons, he came up with a suggestion that ended up being the final route. So he was part of the start, he was part of the finish, he was at the command post and saw everything put in motion. And I think it was a great experience for him to undertake.
Great. Okay, now we will be adjourned.
Mayor, Supervisor DeMartini is the
Oh.
one that has his hand raised.
I can't see him. Supervisor DeMartini, do you have any reports tonight?
Yes, I have a short report tonight. Tomorrow, the county board is going to come up with a plan to spend down the $96 million the federal government put in our bank account. This is the first time I can remember that money was put in our account without us asking for it or a plan to spend it. So we're going to start an ad hoc committee tomorrow. We've done a little bit of work on it already, but $15 million is allocated to the cities, and this has to be for COVID-19 related expenses. Though we still haven't worked out all the details yet. There's about $30 million set aside for businesses that have been affected by the coronavirus, and then there's reimbursements for the county's costs in taking care of everything so far, with protective gear and testing and all that. I'm not on that ad hoc committee. It's going to be our chairman, Kristen Olson, and Terry Withrow. I do have two appointments that I get for that committee, and my two appointments are Anthony Canella and Bill Maddows from Newman. And so we'll come up with a plan, and I'll get back to you more as we get going on it. But I don't have in front of me just what the city's allocation is, but I left that on my desk. But the meeting will be tomorrow. If you have any comments, you can always phone in. But we're just setting this thing up now, so you would expect to get some of that money from the federal program.
All right, thank you, Supervisor. Now we will go to closed session. We have two items tonight. One is conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, and the other is conference with labor negotiator, Ceres Police Officers Association. And after the closed session, we will come out and say something, City Attorney. Thank you. The meeting's adjourned.
Too healthy. I mean, I need the healthy, but. You don't like cashews either?
Okay, let me go get it.
You want to stop the recording on stream?
I'll get that.
Let me know when we're ready.
Yeah, we're ready, Tom. You can report out from the closed session.
Okay. On the first item, no action was taken. On the second item, direction was given to staff.
Thank you, and that adjourns the meeting.